type of favor.
This is the way. Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Tells me you're relentless.
Hello, critics, non-critics, and friends. Welcome to the Film Optix podcast, brought to you by the Drive-In Podcast Network, where we take a glance into comic book movies, blockbusters, indie films, and everything in between. I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined with my co-host, Devin, and friends of the show. We have Nicole Ackman from Next Best Picture and Claire from W Rated. And today we're going to be starting an early celebration for the 10-year film anniversary of the original Hunger Games that debuted 2012. Wow, I am old. So, but a little bit of housekeeping here before we get into our coverage. Before we begin today's episode, you can listen to our podcast on platforms around the internet. If you're a new or seasoned listener to the show, we'd love to hear from you guys. Show us some love and leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you just follow us on Instagram and Twitter, honestly, because we love you guys so much. Over at Film Optix, that is Optix with an X, or email us at filmoptix@gmail.com for any movie-related questions. So let's get this thing started off. Like I said, we're here talking about the Hunger Games. It's been a very, very long time coming. But first, Nicole, how are you today?
I'm really good, and I am so excited to be back on the podcast, and particularly excited to be talking about this movie.
So really quick, let everyone know who you are, where they can find you, and what type of content that you cover.
Yeah, I'm Nicole Ackman. You can find me on Twitter at NicoleAckman16. I write and podcast for a bunch of different places, mostly over at Next Best Picture. I also have my own period drama podcast called Petticoats and Poppies, History Girls at the Movies. And I write for a handful of different outlets, FF2 Media, The Cinemaholic, and Wealth of Geeks, which recently rebranded from Your Money Geek to Wealth of Geeks. I cover sort of all sorts of film, occasionally dabble in television as well, but am particularly focused on, particularly like to cover period dramas, coming of age movies, and any sort of franchise stuff.
Okay, lovely. I think that deserves a nice little applause there from Nicole.
Thank you.
Very nice, very lovely. And of course, this is Claire's first time on the show. So Claire, let everyone know where they can find you and what your podcast is about before we get started.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So you can find me on Twitter at Claire Ellen Hope, Claire without an I, and you can catch my podcast W Rated over on Twitter as well, where we are watching the world's worst rated movies. We are covering the films that feature on IMDb's bottom 100. We watch some really terrible movies and some not terrible movies that have been unfairly maligned. So yeah, that's kind of the aim of the podcast, is to watch them, evaluate them, and see, is it fair that they're on the list, or is it just that they were, we've had a few that were review bombed or were unfairly looked at through the prism of the time they were released, that a lot of female-led films were kind of poorly reviewed because, God forbid, a woman stars in a movie. Let's all be thankful by the time the Hunger Games came out, that changed.
Yes. I think that also deserves a nice little applause there. That was fantastic intro to the show. That is awesome. Devin, you want to introduce yourself or no? You good?
I think we got that covered. It's been a while.
Yeah, so that is my co-host Devin. We've been best friends since high school. It's been a long time. I've honestly lost count, but it's all good. But as I said before, of course, we're going to be reviewing the first Hunger Games movie. Again, this is a part of our new franchise revisited series. We're going to be covering the Hunger Games films throughout a monthly basis. So starting in January, of course, and then ending in April. And I believe the 10-year anniversary for the first film is in March. I think it's March 20-something, 23rd, I want to say. But yeah, it's been forever since I've seen these movies. So we're going to be right back with our Hunger Games 2012 review right after this short break.
Welcome. The time has come to select one courageous young man and woman for the honor of representing District 12 in the 74th Annual Hunger Games.
It's your first year, Prim. Your name's only been in there once. They're not gonna pick you.
Primrose Everdeen.
Prim! I volunteer! I volunteer as tribute.
All right, and that was a little snippet of the trailer from the Hunger Games way back in 2012. And the synopsis is as follows. Katniss Everdeen voluntarily takes her younger sister's place in their Hunger Games, a televised competition in which two teenagers from each of the 12 districts of Panem are chosen at random to fight to the death. Director for this is Gary Ross, and writers include Gary Ross, Billy Ray, and Susan Collins, who was the author of the book. And of course, it stars Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, Liam Hemsworth, Lenny Kravitz, and more, which is crazy to think about the star power that was in these films. So like I said, we're kind of just going to we're going to start this off with our initial reactions of our rewatch, since it's been such a long time for me. But actually, before we get into that really quick, I wanted to ask you guys, has anyone here read the Hunger Games books?
Yeah.
Because, back in 2012, Harry Potter and, of course, like Hunger Games and other Brits of Terabithia, whatnot. We grew up on a lot of, book to movie adaptations, and they never seemed to stop. And now, of course, a lot of books are being transferred over to TV shows, which makes a little bit more sense, or more so than not, unless you're Dune. But we'll start with Claire, and then we'll go to Nicole, then we'll go to Devin, and then I'll close out. So, Claire, have you read the Hunger Games books?
Yes, I've read them more than once. I'm actually just started rereading them this week again because I got so inspired from the rewatch. But I actually not only read them, I taught the first book when I used to be an English teacher. It was one of our set texts, so I taught it to a group of 14-year-olds, and we were studying dystopian literature, which I think is why I love the franchise so much, because it was my first year teaching, so it was like one of the first things I ever got to teach, and I came up with like loads of fun things around it, and it is a really fun book to teach because of the kind of reliable narrator tropes, and then looking at all the politics like through a really simple lens for kind of a younger audience. So yeah, absolutely love the books. So enjoying rereading them right now.
Okay, all right, Nicole. What about? I know you're a big book reader, Nicole. But I just got to ask, just to ask.
Oh, absolutely. I read them, and I remember I read them like as they were being released, and I distinctly remember whenever Mockingjay came out. I don't remember where we were going, but my family was driving somewhere, and I get quite ill if I read in the car. Like I get very nauseous. But I distinctly remember making the choice and being like, I don't care if this makes me sick. I have to read this book right now. But no, I read them as they came out. And what's been really special is my sister is 8 years younger than I am, and she sort of discovered the Hunger Games over the course of the pandemic, and so she just read them all for the first time, and then we as a family had to like watch the movies again. So it's been really fun to sort of be able to revisit my thoughts whenever I was a teenager reading them, with now my sister getting to experience them too.
Okay, awesome. That's amazing. For me, I've never read the books. Unfortunately, I still haven't. I'm sorry. It's when I was younger, it was I hated being told what to read. I just wanted to kind of figure out what I wanted to read on my own. But Devin, have you read the books? I'm not sure if I've asked you this question before.
I have not. As you know, I'm not an avid reader, but I do remember when they were coming out. I remember there was quite a bit of hype around those times when they were coming out, and then everyone was like, "Oh, they're making a movie out of it. It should be exciting."
Yeah. Yeah, I feel it, man. It's crazy because like we literally just got off all the Harry Potter hype, the Harry Potter train with Deathly Hallows Part 2, and then it's like, oh, here's another book movie adaptation, and it's like awesome. And then we also had Twilight and whatnot, so it was very it was a crazy time. But yeah, like as I said before, I just wasn't like I was a reader, but again, I just didn't really care for when people like told me what to read. I mean, I liked Lord of the Flies. And then a few other. Bridge of Terabithia was a good one, and so was The Giver. But everything else that like they made us read, I just didn't really care too much for in school. But it's different times.
If you'd have been in my class, you would have loved it, because they all immediately they got really annoyed about how slowly we were reading it, and they all came in like about the third week. And they're like, "We've all finished it, miss. Can we just talk about the ending?" I was like, "No, some of you haven't finished it." And then they all went out and bought Catching Fire and Mockingjay and were telling me all about it. So yeah, should have been in my class.
I love that.
Right, it's like there is a structure to this class, and we are going to.
It was great. I made, because it was the same year the film came out, so I printed out all the pictures from the film of the tributes, and we put them up on the wall. And so then when we were reading, whenever someone was killed, a kid got to go and take a red pen and cross them out. So it was like a living wall as we were reading through it.
Interactive.
Yeah, and we like, when there were new rules like made, we would print them out and add them to the board so that we knew where we were in the book.
Oh
So it was a fun class.
That is
I love that.
That is awesome. I think when we read the Salem Witch Trials, we didn't do anything like that, but we got to, play the parts, as we're reading through the play. And anyone who, I think it was a main character's name was Mary, but like, of course, everyone thought she was possessed. So everyone just like talked with her with a demonic voice. So it was like a lot of fun. But that's very, very clever. Like, honestly, and before we get any further, of course, this movie has been out for 10 years. So we're just going to go straight into spoilers here. And by the way, I'm still not over Rue's death.
Oh, it's so beautiful, though.
And I was watching it the other day, and I was like, it was so hard. I'm like,
that's actually what stood out most to me. I was like, I definitely don't remember this hitting this hard when I first watched the movie, but I watched it yesterday, and I was like, wow, a couple tears are forming. Like, it helps that Amanda Stenberg is such a great actress.
Yeah, it really, really does. But it really, really hit home for me. But let's go around the show here and just talk about our initial reactions on our rewatch or re-rewatch. I guess we'll start with Claire, because she's technically seen it twice in the
last month.
She can't get enough of it. So I'll go to Claire, then I'll go to Devin, and then we'll end with Nicole for like our initial reactions. How has the film, changed? Has it changed for you at all? Do you like it more? Do you like it less? Like, give us your initial reaction.
Yeah, I definitely like it more. So I remember the first time I saw it when it was released, I hadn't read the book yet. And I do think that reading the book gives you so much more to the film. But I also think it is one of those films that rewards you on a rewatch. No matter how many times you rewatch it, you see different things, new things, little hints. And I think it really rewards you rewatching it with the other films. Like, once you've seen all four, if you then return to the beginning, you suddenly see things in a different way, and you see President Snow just slightly differently, and you look at how Gale interacts with Katniss slightly differently. So yeah, I think it is definitely a film that only rewards with its rewatches. It is probably... Catching Fire is always my favourite, because I'm team Katniss and Peter. I just adore them, so I love that film. But I think it sets up such a solid foundation for the four films and for the franchise that it's hard to fault it.
Okay. All right. Devin, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was better upon rewatch here. Obviously, I haven't seen it since it originally came out in theaters, I believe. Yeah, just really good time. A few things that I noticed were different. Obviously, I mentioned Rue's death definitely hit harder this time around. I don't remember PETA being as involved as he was. For some reason, my initial memory was that he was just kind of like the lame baker guy who hides his face in the tree. Yeah. That's all I could remember of him initially. I think that's just kind of the stigma that's around him as a character, because it's kind of like a classic reversal of gender roles there. Obviously, high school me would not have understood that, but yeah, definitely enjoyable overall, and we'll get into more details more later, but great cast, great story, great setting.
Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, I had rewatched these fairly recently already, like I said, with my sister, but every time I watch this, I'm kind of struck all over again that I really do think that both the first film and Catching Fire are some of the best like book to film adaptations probably ever made, and also like some of the best teen franchise movies ever. I think the star power in this movie is incredible. Like seeing like Stanley Tucci and Lenny Kravitz and Woody Harrelson is just incredible. And I also think it's really interesting to kind of reflect on the fact that this is really where Jennifer Lawrence's career sort of took off, and how young she was whenever this was made, I think is really cool to think about. And I love this movie. And I think the thing that kind of struck me this time that I kind of forget about sometimes, I can never forget about Ruth's death. That has stuck with me. But Cato's death scene, I think, is really interesting. And like one of the few things that I think is maybe even more impactful than it is in the book. I think the way that they handled that was really well done. And I think that, God, this film is just like so well made and it holds up so well. I think this film could literally come out this year and be equally well received, which you cannot say for all 2012 movies.
Yeah. That actually would be nice. I feel like some of the effects were a little dated, surprisingly, like the fire effects. And those dog creatures at the end were just kind of gray, the gray blobs.
Yeah. But it's not as bad as you would expect. Like,
yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. When it comes to CGI, I didn't think the CGI for the dogs. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the actual name of the beast. But it wasn't half bad, because it's like, you know, it's not as dated as Shrek, because it's like if you go back and watch Shrek, it's like, whoa, what are these animatronic like?
Well, like, you guys just redid the Harry Potter series, and like any Quidditch match in Harry Potter is just unwatchable.
It's not as bad as the effects in Prisoner of Azkaban with the werewolf.
Oh,
which everyone who's been listening to this podcast knows my issues with that.
I mean, oh man. Yeah, with CGI, it's always like hit or miss. And I mean, with this one, with the Hunger Games, it's, you know, they had their use of CGI, but like I thought it looked pretty well. Like I watched it on a 4K disc, and I mean, I'm not like a big like, I mean, I'm a big physical media collector just because, but like some people are very like, you know, oh, like the toning's off here, you know, like the color grading's a little weird here. Like I thought it looked pretty well on my TV, and I had a great time with it. Some scenes were a little bit darker, but I think that's just because of the type of TV I have. He's like, you know, the deepest blacks. I'm like, well, that's great, but like I can't see Peter's face in this cave. So. But yeah, the CGI for this was it was I thought it pretty much held up, and I do agree with what Nicole said. Like if these films would have came out today, I think it would have been well received, because I mean it's very rare nowadays that we get such just a female character that's very interesting, and she's honestly just like one of the best. I think I actually had her on my team for the Suit Up Geeks podcast for, you know, like I forgot the name. It was like best female characters, and I had like, of course I had Hermione on my team. I had Katniss Everdeen. I had a pretty stacked team, and I lost within the first round, but it's fine. I know. Oh man. I was like, I did my research, and like, I already know like my top 3, they're already there. I got to get my last 2 in there, but yeah, it's very rare when we have such a great female character. Not because she's female, it's just because of, you know, her desires, and obviously wanting to volunteer instead of her sister, showing the love that she has for her sister, much like we've seen in Black Widow earlier, or last year. Sorry, now it's 2022. But like you really feel that you know, the connection that they have, and even though they don't share a lot of scenes together, the love there is real, and that's the important part. But I wanted to ask you guys, since me and Devin are non-esque Hunger Game book readers, were there any major like changes that they've made for the first Hunger Games that was different in the books, or was it, like you guys said, it was kind of a faithful adaptation? But
it's a lot of world building is like cut out just for time. So a lot of the stuff that takes place in the Capitol, you see all the big moments, but there are a lot more smaller moments. Like you learn about kind of some of the horrible practices that the Capitol do. So when she's in the Capitol and she's being like having all her makeup done and everything like that, and you see all the helpers and the people that work in the room and serve them. Within the book, you find out that some of them are there because they have betrayed the Capitol, and they have like had their tongues cut out, and they can no longer speak, and they are forced to work for the Capitol without a voice. So it's just like small things like that they just wouldn't have been time for in the film. But if you've read the book, you can kind of spot them. You're like, oh, I wonder if that's like I can't remember the word for it now, but you're reminded of them.
Yeah, most of the changes I really do think are sort of things that were very obviously cut for time and that don't matter that much. I think the two biggest changes, though, are the books are told, if I remember correctly, from Katniss's point of view. And so we see a lot more, a lot of things in the movie that obviously we don't get in the book. Things with, particularly, there's a lot more President Snow in the movie, which I actually... I read that it was originally sort of meant to be more of like a smaller role, and then Donald Sutherland was like so into it that they sort of wrote more in for him. And obviously we see more with like Seneca Crane and the Game Makers and that sort of stuff. But the other big change that I know some people like do have some issues with is that in the books, both Gale and Katniss are described as having olive, darker skin. There's much more of there's sort of a racial divide in District 12 that is implied, and there's a big deal kind of made in the book about the class difference in District 12 with the blonde-haired pale people of the town, so to speak, and then the like darker skinned, darker haired miners. And I know that some people, were sort of disappointed that it was definitely an opportunity that they could have cast a young woman of color in the role, and they chose to go with, a very pale Jennifer Lawrence instead.
Like she's sort of like most of the movie, right? Not blonde.
Not blonde.
No, they could have at least gotten her a little bit of a tan. I'm like, she's supposed to spend all this time out hunting, and she looks like that.
It's kind of like. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think like that's one of the biggest things, which again, I think like part of it was trying to keep the film to a certain amount of time. They didn't want to sort of go into all of that class difference stuff. But I do think it is one of the things that the books go a little bit harder on sort of the social commentary than the movies do. And I also think, like you were saying, the books go a little bit harder on sort of the cruelty in the Capitol. And I think there's things that they were probably definitely trying to keep their rating down. Whereas the books, particularly going forward, I think it's a little bit less in this one, can be a bit more, I don't want to say gruesome, but they're a bit more gory, let's say, and graphic than the movies are able to be.
One of the changes that I love, like you mentioned it, you see the Game Makers. I love how much you see Caesar Flickerman's show. I think that was such a clever change to really have that as our overarching view. I think that really helps kind of bookmark the films, because where you don't have Katniss's narration, which works so wonderfully in the films, but in the books I don't think would have worked so well in the films. So I think that Caesar Flickerman kind of storytelling trope works so well for the film.
And if you have Stanley Tucci, you gotta use him.
Tucci gang, obviously.
Those white pearly teeth. I was like, wow, those are like.
I'm sure he loved putting that wig on too.
Exactly. Well, of course, Jared Leto's in this film as well, which I totally forgot.
Is he?
He's he's the guy with like the weird.
No,
fire.
that's
not Jared Leto.
Is that not Jared Leto?
No, he is someone, but he's not Jared Leto.
It's Wes Bentley.
Oh my god.
Wes Bentley.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I thought that was Jared Leto. I swear.
No,
I did notice a Jack Quaid appearance that I definitely didn't know.
Yes.
Having just seen the new Scream, I was like, oh my god, it's that guy.
Yeah.
It was his like first movie.
It's funny. His character's name is Marvel, and he's in The Boys, which is pretty anti-Marvel.
Yeah, he's in a few shots here and there, which I think is like. And I knew he was in there, and then I kind of forgot because I did rewatch the first Hunger Games like mid last year, and then I was like, oh yeah, Jack Quaid is in that. It's like, man, he looks so young. I don't know how old he is or how old he was back then, especially at the time of filming. I'm like, man, he's got a baby face. So he's probably, I'm guessing maybe like 17, 18 years old, but I don't know. You kind of look back on your old pictures. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, I think most of the cast who were playing tributes were in their like late teens, or I think Isabel Furman was something crazy like 14 or something, but the others I think were mostly in their late teens.
So is it they say between 12 and 18, so is it when you hit 19 your name gets taken out of like everything when it comes to the Hunger Games itself?
I think you're safe, Christian, no worry.
Okay, good.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's whenever you hit 19, right?
Yeah, and like so in the isn't hinted at as much in the film, but in the book they tell you that like one of the reasons that names go in there more is because in poor districts like District 12, you can get free food and extra money by putting your name in more times. So like Katniss and Gale's names, I think like she tries to calculate how many times Gale's name must be in there, and it's like in the hundreds, because he has to constantly get grain and oil and stuff for his family. But yeah, I guess when he then ages out I don't know if he had aged out by catching fire. It kind of, because it doesn't really matter. But I guess they just take all those names straight out.
And I think there's typically a correlation between, you age out sort of at the time that you also age out of going to school. Yeah. Because I know in Catching Fire, I think Gale has aged out because I know he's also working in the mines at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, once you can work and like contribute to capitalism, you don't need to go in the Hunger Games anymore.
Yep.
It's like, sweet, awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, I just gotta make it. Yeah, because I knew, like, you know, during the beginning, like, and I really liked during the beginning of the movie how they kind of explain what the Hunger Games is, and they kind of touch on, you know, why they have the Hunger Games, but it seems like, you know, from what your guys' experience with the books, that there's definitely more gruesome thing. I mean, I didn't know about the whole, you know, cutting out the tongue and whatnot. So it's not, and I don't know why I never really picked them up. I guess I honestly have no excuse. So
they're still excellent. Like, I'm thinking about rereading them too, because I do think that like they are the sort of YA books that hold up completely, even if you are an adult reading them.
Yeah. And young adult is usually like my go-to for whatever reason. You know, I kind of go into like, you know, like more hardcore fantasy, like Lord of the Rings. I've tried to read 1,000 times over, and I'm like, I just want to watch the movie again because it's just they're just so epic. Obviously, like Harry Potter, things like that. Even with like his Dark Materials, like the Amber Spyglass and Golden Compass, like for some reason I just kind of gravitate towards those books. Maybe because like they're obviously like also coming of age stories, which is like my biggest like weakness of like anything. Like
I feel
any
that.
kind of movie, any kind of TV show, I am there. Like 100%.
But I've now aged out that now when I watch them, I realised I was watching something a couple of months ago and I was like, oh no, I'm so old now that when I watch coming of age dramas, I fancy the dads, not the main characters. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. It's horrific.
It's like that Geico commercial. Geico commercial where they have it to where kids are trying not to be, I end up like their parents. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, I was pulling up on Rotten Tomatoes just for the runtime, and I forgot what it was. It was, I guess it's around 2 hours and 22 minutes. I think it's actually pretty wonderfully paced because, I mean, majority of the film, I mean, I can't remember exactly what mark when the Hunger Games actually starts, but it's at least, I want to say maybe 30, 40 minutes that we get before the actual Hunger Games starts. And I like how they did that instead of like, I don't know, there were so many movies within like the past year. I think even for like Mortal Kombat, like the tournament's called Mortal Kombat, but the tournament never happens. So it's kind of like the pre-tournament to the tournament. But I like how even with the Hunger Games, and by the way, I've always wanted one of those like jackets that she's wearing, like when she's going up through the tube, Katniss. And, you know, they're all kind of like standing in like kind of like a crescent circle. And it's like, okay, like we're here. Like this is real. Like it's so I love like the arena effect, and I don't know, it's crazy stuff. But I wanted to kind of go around. If there was there anything you guys wanted to bring up during our coverage that you guys haven't had a chance to talk about? Any, you know, likes or dislikes, of course. We'll start with Nicole, we'll go to Devin, and then we'll end with Claire.
I first have to shout out the fact that Cinna is one of my favorite characters in the whole Hunger Games franchise. He's like my second favorite character overall. I will say my first favorite character is not in this one.
Is it a hunky guy with a trident?
It might be.
Good choice.
Yeah, thank you. But I think that Lenny Kravitz is such perfect casting as Cinna, and I think that the way that
has he done anything else?
Lenny Kravitz
in movies at least.
I had this discussion the other day, and I don't think he has done anything else.
I don't know that he does.
But
he was so kind and nice.
He's like the heart of the film.
Yeah.
Like once it goes to the Capitol, he's so warm in the very small part he has.
I'm seeing he was in Precious and Lee Daniels the Butler.
Okay.
Among
Yeah.
others.
So a handful of things, but he's phenomenal in this. I also think like, I mean, so much of the casting in this is just absolutely perfect. Like
amazing.
Woody Harrelson as Haymitch is insanely just perfect. I love the performance that he gives as Haymitch. I love how sort of what he starts in this movie sort of gets, there's depth to it, I think, after you've seen all the rest of the story that you don't even necessarily realize is there whenever you're watching the first one for the first time. I also think that Jennifer Lawrence really does give a phenomenal performance in this for her to have been so young and so early on in her career. But yeah, I love any sort of sister story. Like I said, I have a younger sister. We have quite a large age gap. So I think from the time that I first read this, I was in like, I want to say like 8th or 9th grade whenever I read it for the first time. And I definitely related to a lot of it. And it's something that like I find very affecting. I cry almost every time when I watch it.
So you're saying you would volunteer as tribute?
I would.
Good,
like,
good.
Yeah. I absolutely would for my sister. And I think it's a franchise that like means a lot to me, and I think it's very nice whenever something that does mean a lot to you like this, whenever you can watch it as an adult and be like, oh no, actually it is good. Like I'm not just nostalgic, because that's not true of everything. Like there's other things that I loved as like a kid or a teenager that now I watch and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, I'll never rewatch Garden State. I can't cope with learning that film is not good because 14-year-old Claire goes hard.
But like, I mean, I dressed up as Katniss for Halloween the year that this movie came out. Actually, last year my sister dressed as Clove for Halloween because we realized that one of her horseback riding jackets looks quite like the jackets that they wear in the arena. And we were like, gotta take advantage of that. But yeah, it's I think this movie is really, really masterfully made. And I think that the way that it is able to sort of give us this like, fun dystopian adventure thing while not losing all of the social commentary of the book is really clever, because I do think that that's one thing that sort of gets lost in a lot of these adaptations, like things like even Harry Potter. I think you lose some of the social commentary that's occurring in the books, which I mean, we could also talk about how bad or good that commentary is because of who it came from. Whereas Suzanne Collins is like an author that I can still be proud to like her work, which I love. But I really do think that like it has been interesting watching this after sort of the, how do I say this? The political events of the past like 5 years, let's say, have given me like a very different perspective on a lot of the stuff in the Hunger Games, which I think is just very interesting to sort of see, the way that the government is portrayed in it.
It's always been funny for me as someone based in the UK, because the whole of Panem and Hunger Games is just North America. So like for years I was like, there is no way like Europe, even though we're not part of Europe anymore, there's no way that like Europe and the other places would like let that happen. And then like the last 3 or 4 years I'm like, oh, we definitely would. Oh no, we probably had our own version.
Yeah, it is cool for me too, because District 12 is like supposedly like, sort of in like the Appalachian mountain area, they say, in like North Carolina and Tennessee. So it is cool because that's where I'm from. And they actually did some filming up in like the Asheville area of North Carolina, which is somewhere that I go pretty frequently. So it's it also is cool just because this is one of the last movies that was, I think, had a lot of filming in North Carolina before we had some political things happen that meant that the film industry really moved out of here. And it's just now starting to come back a bit more. So it also is cool because there's scenes in the woods where I'm like, yeah, I think that would have been here.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't know it was filmed in North Carolina. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's yeah, I did not know that, but that's a really good.
Not
point.
all of it, but there's parts of it, particularly outdoor parts of it.
Okay. Like more so like the beginning, like the woodsy area, or okay,
Yep.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I can't really say Nashville's like a really big film town, but
yeah,
I mean, they used to film the show Nashville here when it first started.
I would hope
they
so.
moved, like,
I loved that show.
and then they moved somewhere else. I'm like,
we lost just about everything to Atlanta. So
yeah, everything goes down there. I mean, I drove down there for Spider-Man No Way Home for a screening, and I was like,
yeah,
I don't think I'm doing this ever again. To be completely honest, like I love Georgia. Like I mean, Atlanta was like downtown Atlanta was amazing. Like just so nice, so clean. But that drive, I mean, it's only 4 hours, but it killed me because like we drove down, we saw the movie, and turned straight back.
Yeah, that sounded like a rough day.
yeah. I was like, yeah, I need this day off. They're like, why? I'm like, it's like, you know, movie related. They're like, oh, you're seeing a new Spider-Man movie? I was like, yeah. This only like 2 days before. Like, it's really not that big of a deal, but you know, deadlines and everything with written reviews. So, but so yeah, let's go over to Devin. Was there anything you wanted to bring up that you liked or disliked about the movie on your rewatch?
Yeah, I'm just glad we actually rewatched this one because it's nice to kind of look back on it and just see, obviously, the star-making role that it was for Jennifer Lawrence. She's just amazing, as always. Probably my favorite actress going currently. Don't Look Up was great. It's also crazy to just see how many kind of iconic moments there were in cinema for this movie. Like, obviously, May the Odds Be Forever in Your Favor, I Volunteer as Tribute, this thing, the whistle.
Okay,
the whistles.
That is mahogany.
This is Scout's honor. This whole because when I first saw it in theaters, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Devin. I'm sorry, but like when they first like, you know, do the kiss and they put up like the 3 fingers, I'm like, that's Boy Scouts. Like that's Boy Scouts.
In the book, they tell you it's like a very old-fashioned thing from District 12, and it's like their only way of like showing kind of rebellion, so without getting in trouble, and that's why then it picks up throughout the film and gets bigger.
I like that. I like that a lot. I just thought the, you know, correlation there was cool, but yeah, it's like Scout's honor. Like we literally had to do that, and I was like, oh, I'm like, I know that. Like I understood that reference. Sorry, Devin. Go ahead.
But yeah, it's just cool to see like some of those moments are still like culturally relevant even today. Like I Volunteer as Tribute is a pretty common gift going around the internet always, and probably always will be. Just a classic moment. As far as any issues that I had, I think I kind of had an issue with Kato's casting, I would say. You guys can give more insight into if the books shine any light onto this, but I feel like just his casting, he wasn't very intimidating for me. Like I feel like he's got that baby face. I was like, he's not scary. Come on, it's just Kato. He's just a cool guy.
What I like about that casting though is that like he looks intimidating enough that you can see to like where like Rue or Foxface or one of these other like young tributes, he would be intimidating, but you don't lose the fact that like he is also just a teenager. And I think that that's what's so important with this casting is that they really did make it clear that like these are children, and I appreciate that they didn't age up the casting like they do in too many like YA book to movie adaptations. So like you never lose the fact that all of these are kids.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think that's a really good point for Kato, especially, you know, coming from District 1, you know, like they're literally trained, like essentially bred killers, and you know, moments before his death, when he gets, you know, fed to the hounds, I guess, you know, he's talking about, you know, it's like, oh, he's like I have to, he's like I can still kill PETA, you know, he's like I can still win this thing, and it's kind of like you don't really understand like the big pressure on District 1. From all this, you know, oh, well, obviously there can only be one victor. So it's like, I still feel like that's an awkward situation to be in. It's like, hey, one of us is going to bring, you know, some prize and glory back to our district, but only one of us. But I really like how, and I actually forgot on my 2 rewatches, I guess, when they changed up the rules, because, you know, it's all for show, you know, it's just a, you know, good show, good for entertainment for the Capitol, and how, you know, they changed it from one winner to, hey, you know, if you have, if both victors are from, you know, from the same original district, then you could win. And I kind of like the whole solidarity of how PETA and Katniss kind of showed, like, kind of like stood them up. And it's like, okay, you know, we're going to eat these poison berries. We're just going to kill ourselves and there will be no victor. Then, you know, it kind of like, I feel like if that would have happened, I don't know what would have happened in general, but like that definitely would have caused like some pushback from the other districts, as we saw with after Rue's death. So it's very it's kind of scary to think about, to be completely honest. I know Battle Royale is another, I don't know if it's a film franchise or if it's just like a single movie.
There are sequels to it, but I don't think they're like considered a franchise. I've only seen the first one, but I do know there is a sequel. I don't know how much it's considered like on par with the first one. Okay. And
Devin, really quick, did you have anything else you want to say before we move on?
You guys want to watch the Starving Games as well?
I have to for my podcast. There's both the Starving Games and the Hungover Games, and both.
There's two.
Both of them are on the bottom 100.
I didn't know those were actual things.
Yep, they're real movies. I can't wait to watch them. It's going to be great because I'm just going to spend the whole podcast talking about how great the actual Hunger Games is and not like involving myself with those films.
I feel it.
I also just want to mention, like, every time I see the PETA face tree scene, I'm just going to laugh. It's just funny.
It's so strange.
He's like, hey, Katniss, how's it going?
I'm really trying to figure out what this being a baker of cakes. I've always tried to make the correlation. I'm like, okay, yeah, you know how to make like cool little designs, but like, is anyone in District 12 asking like, hey, I need you to make me a bark themed cake?
Yeah, he's an artist.
And put it on my face.
It always freaks me out, but like, it's cool, but it's like the amount of time and effort you have to put in. Not only just like, you know, a portion of like your body, like your forearm or something, but like your entire face, and to blend in with the ground. How many people have stomped on you?
Did he have a mirror to make sure he was fully blended? Like, how did he do it?
It's like,
and it kind of just magically gets wiped off too when they start talking.
I can't imagine. Like, I think this would make it like for the Hunger Games if they actually had commentary for the players to hear. Where it's like, oh, like you see PETA over here trying to, you know, camouflage himself. And it's like, why are you, what? Like, no. I've always found it so funny. Like, it's a very amazing and unique skill to have. But it's like every time.
It's just hilarious.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Every time it cracks me up. But Claire, is there anything you wanted to bring up? You know, likes, dislikes, comments, concerns.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones, like Nicole already said it, like what an ensemble cast, like it, and when you compare it to other YA franchises, like they knock it out of the park, not both with like the young talent they found, but also the really steady adult actors to really ground it, because it continues on with the further films. It has, in my opinion, of a franchise, one of the best ensembles, if not the best for that kind of film. And then the other thing I think they do well, or, you know, surprisingly well, is how they portray the violence. So I don't know what rating it was in the US, but over here it's what's called a 12A. So like anyone 12, or if you're under 12, your parents have to bring you. And I felt like they did do the violence well, that you can clearly see what's happening and you can see that kids are dying, but it's not brutal, it's not lingered on, it's there for the plot, it's servicing the plot. You get, you know, the grotesque tracker-jacker death, which I think is one of the most brutal ones and is done so well. But I think they handle that balance of showing but not showing how brutal it is in the cornucopia scene. We see that tiny little young boy, and is it Kato that takes him out? And you know exactly what's happened, but you don't have to see it. It's enough. And I think that was handled really sensitively, and they did a really good job there.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there, because I think for here in the U.S. it was PG-13, which is basically the same thing. You know, as soon as you turn 13 here, everyone thinks, you know, they're tough cookies. Like, yeah,
You're an adult.
I can go to PG-13. I can go see the new Harry Potter movie by myself. I don't need my parents. It's like, I just need someone to drive me though. But
see, I lived a 10-minute walk from my local cinema, so I didn't need anyone to drive me.
Lucky, yeah. But I do agree with you. When it came to the violence, it wasn't like, we all know what it's about, but they didn't have to like hone in on it. You know, obviously, you know, there are children who die in this franchise, especially within the first game, sorry. And I think it is done well, because nowadays with PG-13, like with like the Batman that's coming up, like they're really going to push the limits of what they can get away with in that. But like you said, with a lot of young adult fantasy, especially even in Harry Potter, I feel like the deaths are actually done well, but I think it's just a little bit darker in Harry Potter, especially in Half-Blood Prince, with the whole bathroom scene with Draco and Harry. But I really like how with the Hunger Games, like you said, we know what it's there for, but it's not really servicing the plot because it's there, like it's the overarching theme, but that's not Katniss's journey. Like obviously people are going to be, deceased, but I really like how for any audience, anyone can go see this and be okay with it. Even with Cato's death, like I think was Katniss shot an arrow off screen and, after he fell in and you kind of see him being torn apart, but it's so dark that it's kind of like, okay, we get what's going on. And they cut back to, them essentially putting him out of his misery.
It's no worse than Scar being eaten by the hyenas in The Lion King.
Yeah. I'm really curious, honestly, because, Suzanne Collins released sort of a prequel book,
Did she?
Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, which is about President Snow and like the first
Jon
Hunger
Snow?
Games, I guess.
I'm just kidding.
Isn't it the 25th Hunger Games? So like the first Quarter Quell?
Yeah, it's something like, I read it. I should remember it, but it's essentially, it's one of the early ones because it's when President Snow is like a young boy. And at that point there weren't obviously winners to be mentors. So capital children were assigned to mentor people from the districts. And so he's a mentor to a girl from District 12 in it. And there's talk about it being made into a movie. And I just really do wonder if they'll sort of keep that same approach to the violence in it, and keep it, very sort of as tame as it can be while still getting across the point, or if because it will be made in this decade instead, or if they... It
feels like the track record for these prequels isn't very very good right now.
And the fact that you can't remember the book makes me think the book might not be very good.
I actually really enjoyed it. I read it like a year and a half ago. So, I feel like Corona has ruined my brain, so I can't remember things. But no, it is quite a good book, and it's a really interesting story. So I do think they could bring it to the screen in a really interesting way. But I do sort of wonder how it would compare to these movies, particularly in how they would handle things like the violence.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know there was any type of prequel. Like, so how many books is it for the prequel? Or is it just one, or
it's just
two?
One? Yeah,
it's just one.
One. Although there were rumors that she was also going to write a prequel book about like Haymitch's Hunger Games. I heard that rumor.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I would be so down for.
That I would be very interested.
A de-aged Woody.
Yeah. Oh God.
Who would you cast as a young Woody Harrelson?
I don't think no one comes to mind for me.
Like
at
an
least.
unknown, I feel.
Yeah, I think so.
I would like a sequel with all the Hemsworth brothers in the Hunger Games, just duking it out.
The Hemsworth Games.
Yes, there you go.
There we go.
I imagine.
I don't know.
Luke's
I
wise,
feel like,
though.
Yeah, it was like I feel like maybe that the third brother can fox face his way to a win.
Oh my gosh. That would be very, very interesting. But yeah, man, this entire I'm very excited, and like no one shoot me, but I still to this day have not seen Mockingjay Part 1 or Part 2.
What?
I stopped at Catching Fire.
To.
I stopped at Catching Fire.
Why?
I saw it in theaters, and then I don't know what happened where I didn't go back to go see the others. So I'm very interested to see how this thing turns out.
Mockingjay Part 1 I love, but I do understand the criticism that people have that it is a bit of a slog. I love it because of reading the book. I have the context. But I think Mockingjay Part 2 is brilliant. I feel like that. There's no criticism for that one.
I'm so excited to see what you think of them whenever you get to watch them for the first time.
Yeah, because it's weird. Like, this is something that, like, I'm very shocked that I still haven't. Like, I've had the Blu-rays forever, and I just haven't. My backlog is crazy. Like, I still need to watch Peaky Blinders on Netflix. Like it's crazy. But yeah, it's not that I didn't want to see them. I can't remember if I can't remember exactly what happened, but I just never went back.
I didn't see Mockingjay Part 2 until like last year, the year before last.
Yeah.
Because it came out so far after the books that like I just honestly kind of forgot that it was a thing. And I think it came out while I was like in college maybe. And so I was just like busy and it completely was not on my radar. But I was pleasantly surprised because I feel like it is one of those movies that has like a really bad reputation, like more so than it deserves.
Part 2?
Yeah. And I think Part 2 is quite good.
I think Part 2.
Yeah, and I've heard, you know, like the discourse between, I don't know what happens, but I just know there's a lot of people just don't like Part 2. And I'm like, well, how could you not? Catching Fire and the Hunger Games are so good. Like, you know,
it's the weakest book as well, though, in my opinion, anyway. I feel like Mockingjay is the weakest book because it does something different that I think was the right choice, but it does make it a different read and therefore a different watch. I think she made the right choices, but I read the 3 books almost in like quick succession. Like I read Catching Fire in a day because I got so addicted to it, and then I like cracked open Mockingjay expecting Catching Fire 2 and was like, what is this? And I think that happened with the films as well, that Catching Fire is a really high point of the films. Mockingjay Part 1 and 2 aren't bad in any way, shape or form, but they aren't the same.
I also do think it sort of suffers from that whole thing of after Harry Potter split its last book into 2 movies, every YA franchise felt the need to do that. And I don't know that they actually needed 2 movies for Mockingjay. Like it works better than Breaking Dawn does. Is that the Twilight one that's the last? Yeah. It works better than that because at least there is like actual things that are happening. Yeah. Unlike in Breaking Dawn Part 1 where literally just nothing happens.
And like the book of Mockingjay has a distinct turning point, so it does feel like a book of 2 halves. Yeah. So there is a point.
Which it makes sense. Yeah. But I do think maybe they could have still done it in 1 movie and it would have felt a little bit more coherent and also timely, because I do think that that's part of it too, is that like it came out so far from the first Hunger Games that people were sort of over it, I want to say. Like, so I don't know, I still think they're definitely worth a watch. So it's good that you're doing this series and you'll have to watch them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, I just saw they're announcing like the Hunger Games like steelbooks. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna buy those. So
yep.
So it's like, I mean, it's the same movies, but it's like, God, the amount of times I've rebought Harry Potter, I just don't care anymore. It's like, I know, and Lord of the Rings, it's like, I know I'm giving you the same amount of, or more money for the same thing that I love so much, but it's like, damn you. But yeah, I'm very surprised that I think Mockingjay Part 2 ended in 2014. That
sounds right.
I want to say. I can't. What was it?
No, actually, is that might be Part 1.
What was that? Part
2
1
was 2015.
Yeah.
2015. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I was in college during that time. So
it's crazy
that's
how fast
probably
they pumped
why.
all these out.
Well, they had the issue that like they didn't want the actors to grow up too quickly because Catching Fire takes place a year after Hunger Games, but Mockingjay takes place exactly after Catching Fire, so they couldn't have Jennifer Lawrence growing up too much. And also I think they were like, shit, she just like won an Oscar and blew up, like keep her, like she signed up for this.
Yeah. Academy Award winner. But yeah, I think from what you guys are saying for Mockingjay Part 1, Part 2, I definitely feel like it was more of a business decision as well. Because I mean, for Harry Potter, like that is, you know, a huge deal. I think Hunger Games definitely had a really big following as well, from what I can remember. Because I mean, everyone crazy over them. But I can definitely see, if you guys are saying, you know, there's more of a turning point within the last book since it is a trilogy, I could see how using the excuse of, oh, well, you know, there's this weird, you know, this not weird because I haven't seen it yet, but like there's this bit of a moment that like, you know, definitely defines Part 1 and Part 2. So we can definitely make this, you know, stretch this out type thing. But of course, like you said, you know, with the age of the actors, actresses on screen, it's very hard to kind of like, you know, line up everything. Because even with like Dune, because like they had the option or the ability to film them back to back, but I mean, we'll see. I just hope everyone doesn't look too old.
Yeah.
Timothée Chalamet doesn't
And
age.
Dune Part
That
2.
dude's going to look that age in
No.
his 50s.
Neither this is Zendaya either,
Yeah.
so it's like
the new
I
Paul
think
Rudd.
we're fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Everyone who has died so far, within Dune, I think they might be able to pull it off because, yeah, maybe. So, let's get into our actually. We're going to add ratings this time around, just to everyone, the amount of times that I watch movies, and it's like my ratings have changed over and over and over. But we'll start with this one. So we're going to start with Claire, then we'll do Devin, and then Nicole. Just give us your rating, whatever rating scale that you usually use. We kind of go back. I usually use like my Letterboxd rating. We've known to do like, I don't know, 80 out of like 100 scale rating, but whatever feels best for you.
Yeah, so I normally rate out of 5. So I would put it as a 3.5 because though I absolutely love it, I do have to acknowledge that a lot of my love comes from knowing how the story continues and of having read the book. And I do remember the first time I saw it thinking that was good but not great, and only rewatching with so much more context. I was like, oh my God, it's great. So I'm like, I feel like I have to acknowledge just the film that I'm watching, not the franchise as a whole. So 3.5.
Okay. All right. Devin, what about you?
Yeah, I'm right around there as well. I'm like at an 80, just pretty solid. Didn't have many complaints, but definitely a fun rewatch. I wasn't expecting to love hopping into this world as much as I did.
Yeah. All right. Nicole, what about you?
I'm a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I think I give it a lot of credit just for being such a good screenplay. And I think book to film adaptations are something that I sometimes am so disappointed by. And the fact that I love this book as much as I do and think that it is a good movie of it wins it some definite points from me.
I feel it. Yeah. So I'm actually with Nicole on that one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. On Letterboxd after my rewatch. What did I say? I can't remember. Let's pull it up. Oh yeah, I said 10 years later, and I'm still not over Rue's death. And that's very, very true. But yeah, it's the beginning of a new friend of a beloved franchise, and it's just what I've noticed like within like recent years, we just really haven't had. I mean, outside of Marvel. With their crazy factory work of like everything that they pump out per year, and now doing with like TV shows as well. It's been a while since we've just had like that franchise that like everyone's invested in. I mean, like superhero movies, I feel like are a little bit different because the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's not just like a trilogy or like a 5-part like thing. Like it's still an ongoing thing. Same thing with DC, everything that they're doing. But it's been a while since we've really just had like that franchise that everyone's just into, and like a franchise that people would normally not watch. And it kind of reminds me of like just like Black Panther in and of itself, because the movie is so freaking good, and it's like you had everybody going to the theater to see it. People who were non-moviegoers, people who didn't like comic book films were going to go see it and whatnot. So that was like a really big like phenomenon. But I don't know, like, I mean, with Dune, we'll see, but it's just so far, as much as I love Dune, I'm not feeling the same love as I felt with the Hunger Games, or even like with Twilight and things of that nature. I know the Golden Compass, the movie wasn't so great, but the TV show is very, very good. I can't wait for season 3 this year. It's going to be very awesome. But yeah, I feel like we're missing something. It's even like when I watch the Oscars every year, it's like I haven't felt something magical since like Return of the King, minus Parasite, because that was freaking amazing.
But it's the loss of the monoculture, isn't it? Because like you mentioned June didn't get me out to the cinema. I watched the trailer and I was like, I kind of know that won't be for me. I'm sure it will be great, but it won't be for me. But even like my kind of non-film friends, when they're like, any big films coming out around Christmas, I would like mention June, and they're like, never even heard of it. Like it didn't filter out to kind of the everyman, and there doesn't seem to be, because there's so much choice that no one knows what the choices are anymore, and we don't. Like Hunger Games came out just before Netflix kind of really exploded, like before Stranger Things and the rest, and so I think it caught the end of a culture that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Because like, honestly, outside of Hunger Games, I don't know what was like the next big. I mean, besides Marvel,
They tried.
I guess it was Marvel.
Maze Runner.
And I guess technically like Star Wars coming back is probably the closest thing that we have in terms of sort of everyman appeal in a franchise. But even that was like them rebooting an older franchise, not a new one.
A requel. Scream!
Yeah, because they tried with Divergent and they tried with Maze Runner and they didn't pick up the audiences for various reasons.
Divergent didn't even end up making its final film, I don't think,
No,
did it?
because they
No,
tried
it
to move it
didn't.
to TV
It
and
did
the actors
not.
quite
Yeah.
rightly were like, no, we signed up for a film, we'll do a film, we're not doing a TV program. So it never happened.
Yeah.
Which is annoying
Yeah.
because I didn't want to read the books, but I would kind of like to know how it ends. I think I read the Wikipedia article at some point just to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you know, the beloved Artemis Fowl and the amazing success of that movie.
I read that book and thought that book was terrible, so I don't know why they tried to adapt it.
We don't
I
speak
never read
about
the
Artemis
books.
Fowl. You've heard of We Don't Talk About Bruno. Get ready for We Don't Talk About Artemis Fowl.
Honestly, that is I thought about watching it, and one of my friends was like, he's like, don't.
That's got to be one of the worst
Don't.
trailers ever made.
Don't. Like, I watched it. Don't watch it.
It's-
But listen, I respect Kenneth Branagh got in there. He put in the least effort possible, and he got that Disney money.
Disney paycheck.
So
He got that
You
Disney
know?
money.
I respect the hustle.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like Alfred Molina coming back for Doc Ock. He's like, oh, like, why'd you come back? He's like, oh, it's all about the money. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I appreciate
respect
it, man.
it.
With honest, yeah, I respect it, honestly. But yeah, so 4 out of 5 stars for me for the first Hunger Games. I kind of just want to dive. I want to dive into Catching Fire right now so badly, but I'm trying to refrain myself until next month. But that pretty much concludes our review, our 10-year celebration anniversary review of the first Hunger Games films. Just wanted to thank Claire and Nicole again for coming back on. Claire, it's been amazing having you on. We'd love to have you back. This was a great discussion by all. Thank you, Riverside, for sponsoring. I'm just joking, but but yeah, we're trying a new little setup, so we'll see how this works out. If not, we always have Old Faithful to go back to. But I wanted to take this time really quick for Nicole and Claire to kind of plug their content, let everyone know what's coming up on your respective outlets. We'll start with Claire, and then we'll end with Nicole, and then we'll close on out.
Yeah, so W-rated time of recording, we've just released our Human Centipede 2 episode. Ouch.
Boy.
And we, coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to have S. Darko, the Donnie Darko sequel no one asked for and no one knows existed. And
But there's a Donnie Darko sequel?
S. Darko is about his little sister. It is
Wow.
not good. Spoiler for the podcast. And then we will be covering the Golden Raspberries. So everyone else is watching all of the Oscars ahead of the Oscars. We will be watching what have been voted the worst films of the year and trying to cover all of them in under 2 hours. So
That sounds like a lot of fun.
it nearly killed me last year. I think we recorded and I went for an entire bottle of wine. It was a fun edit.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh. Was there anything else you want? I wasn't sure if you were finished or not.
No,
I'm sorry,
no.
I didn't mean to cut you
All
off.
good.
Okay. All right, Nicole, let everyone know where they can find you on the internets.
Yeah, like I said, I'm over on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at Nicole Ackman 16. I've got link trees in all those locations to the places that I write and podcast for. On Next Best Picture and Wealth of Geeks, I'm going to be covering some Sundance movies over the next week or so. So very excited for that. I'm not doing like full Sundance like a lot of people are. I'm doing mini Sundance, seeing like 8 movies, which feels a lot more manageable. And then also on my period drama podcast, my friend Maggie and I are covering Cyrano and then The Last Duel. So we'll be talking sort of about the history behind those films and sort of giving some more context. So if you have seen those, they're both excellent movies. I highly recommend both of them. I don't know why I have personally picked up running The Last Duel's like PR campaigns, but
Because
it is on
someone
HBO
needed
Max
to.
now.
And
Right, like someone
in
has
Europe,
to.
it's on Disney Plus. You can watch it.
Okay, there we go. In Europe, Disney Plus. In the US, HBO Max. Highly recommend it. And then come check out our episode. I read the book that it's based on, so I'm going to be giving a lot of facts, talking about how historically accurate it is or isn't. Obviously, if I'm raving about it, it is. Spoiler alert. But and you can find that at Petticoats and Poppies History Girls at the Movies.
Okay, nice. I loved Cyrano. Like, it broke
so
me.
Oh my god. I've watched it like 4 times.
So jealous.
I've seen it twice. I just can't put that screener down for some reason. I'm like,
Yep.
Please
wow,
send
this
it
is
to
like...
Dublin.
If it weren't region coded, man.
Seriously.
Yeah, no, it's so good. I'm so excited for people to see it. And yeah, we did a fun episode where we talked about sort of the history of Cyrano, like as a property going from the play to today, and also about the history of the man who wrote the original play. So
okay,
super excited for people to hear that. Super excited to actually like use my history degree.
Is it out in? It's not out in theaters.
It's being delayed until February.
Yeah.
It's coming. February, Love's in the Air. I get it.
Yeah.
Probably the perfect time for that to come out. Yeah, I really do adore that film. Like, oh, Peter Dinklage, he never disappoints. Like,
so good.
Never.
So good.
But for us coming up on the podcast, we're going to be doing a Peacemaker season 1 review sometime soon. We're not entirely sure. I've seen the first 7 episodes, even though it is more of a weekly basis. I'm enjoying it so far, but we were not given the season finale. So we're waiting to do that. And I believe we're also going to try to cover, I think it's an HBO Max film called The Fallout, which looks very, very interesting. A very big Gen Z movie that kind of caught my eye. Well, honestly, as soon as Billie Eilish started playing, I was there. I was starting to listen.
Jenna Ortega is going to own 2022.
She really is. Like, I was like, I feel like this, obviously we reviewed Scream, and then, she was in that, and now she's in Fallout, and I was like, oh, like, she's in another, like, it's great. Like, I think she's definitely going to be building herself a very impressive resume so far, for sure. And of course, if you're listening to this, I think are we doing Jackass Forever, Devin? I don't know. Maybe.
Sounds like a good time.
I think so. Yeah. So that'll definitely be our next, because this is going to be dropping next month, not next month, excuse me, next week in January. So by the time this is out, we'll definitely be having some more things in the works, in the pipes. I think I'm going to start doing some mini-sodes here on the podcast, some little solo type initial reactions, just to kind of cover the TV shows that I really, really like that Devin doesn't like. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon and whatnot. But yeah, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. And of course, for everyone out there, just a few call to actions. Of course, we have a Discord for everyone to join. We're trying to build a nice little film community, of film lovers and TV lovers, just to kind of, just talk about the things that we love, talk about the things that we wish we were getting paid to do, for sure. And of course, leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you're listening on those respective platforms. And of course, always share this episode with a friend, your mother, your brother, your lover, whoever it is. Definitely want to, get the podcast
Katniss,
out there.
Peta.
Katniss, you're the Katniss to my Peta.
A girl can only dream.
So definitely, and of course, if you haven't checked out our Scream 5, it's Scream 5. Let's call it Scream 5. It's up on the podcast now. Me and Devin kind of went into that, and we had a really great time with it. So definitely check out that episode if you're looking for something to kind of get you through your work week, because man, I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm working. But again, Claire and Nicole, thank you guys so much for coming on. We'd love to have you guys back on. I think for Catching Fire, we do have Amy Smith and JD Duran coming on. So that'll be, of course, dropping in February, again, since this is a monthly series, because like I said, Harry Potter took a lot out of me, and so did The Matrix. So of course, if you do enjoy our franchise revisited, we do have Matrix 1 through 4 up on the podcast, and as well as Harry Potter, which Nicole was, just gushing a little bit over Lupin, of course, respectively.
A little.
I mean, such a fantastic character. But that pretty much concludes today's episode. Make sure to follow our guests on their respective platforms. All of their links will be in the episode notes below. And it's time to wrap on up here. So let me bring this bad boy on. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you all for listening. And if you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And follow us on Twitter to stay in the know. That was Devin, Claire, Nicole. My name is Christian. We'll see you guys in the next one. And may the odds be ever in your favor.